Hello, beauties. Welcome to this month's cosmic check-in. And today we're discussing the Aries full moon, a time of release, of culmination, and a raw confrontation with what we've been holding inside. This isn't about planting new seeds. Aries is the first sign of the zodiac, and so sometimes we speak to Aries as a beginning stage. But full moons are about culminations. They're about endings, release. So we have a bit of an interesting dynamic this week where there's something rising to the surface, and it is actually creating a new beginning in a way based off of an ending. So there's a lot here around clearing space, around letting go, and combining the energies of Libra and Aries in a way that we can move forward with clarity and more balance. And I want to start in a place that's a little shadowed this week, a little secret, a little talk about this concept of food. Now, we don't normally think about food when we think about Aries, but I'm going to get into something a little bit deeper, a little bit outside of the box. Food for the Archons. In Gnostic thought, Archons are these parasitic forces that feed on fear and rumination and obsessive thinking. Every paranoid thought, every looping anxiety, every mental what if is nourishment for them. The liberation, the gnosis as they call it, comes from starving them. When you see these loops for what they are, when you are able to witness your mind without feeding it, you touch a form of freedom. Direct knowledge that separates you from compulsive fear and obsessive control. So this full moon has the moon in Aries opposing the sun in Libra, but it's also squaring Jupiter in Cancer. So the emotional tension is really big and really potent. You may feel pulled between acting impulsively and really balancing relationships or responsibilities. Aries wants release and Libra wants harmony. But Jupiter amplifies everything. So this can make your reactions feel larger than life. So here's a practical warning. The intensity can make accidents more likely, especially in our cars or during hurried activity during this 2-week period. So I encourage you guys to move carefully, to pause and to stay present. Mercury is applying to a square with Pluto. And this is where mental patterns, rumination, and also paranoia become really visible. Thoughts can feel invasive or exaggerated, like they're not entirely yours. This is the perfect time to recognize the Archon at work. Name the thoughts, trace the source, and refuse to feed them. So practices like journaling or meditative movement or simply observing without attachment can really help you release what no longer serves you. You're not suppressing fear, you're disengaging from it. Many of us deal with narcissistic abuse. This is why we're here. We're on this soul journey of trying to find home within ourselves, to create home within our relationships. And this is difficult when we have, for example, a narcissistic parent or grandparent or a husband in many cases, sibling even. And it can be really hard to untangle. I personally know this, having experienced it myself. The wide webs that narcissistic abuse can really create. Narcissists love to feed on our energy. We all know this. This is nothing new. And they put doubts in our minds, in our capabilities, in what we feel we deserve, what we feel we know to be true. Jenna Barilli, a really good friend of mine, she created a wonderful hypnosis, a meditation, which if you're an Astro School member or want to join Astro School, if you're listening at the vestry level today, you can visit with, or you can purchase it on your own. She's done a few hypnosis over here with us. One of them is also on quitting a bad habit. So maybe, this isn't a physical person in your life. Maybe this is, the beast of smoking or binge eating or whatever, what have you. Visit with those meditations because they are lovely resources to begin during this time. Now, Venus is in Virgo, and it is opposite Saturn retrograde, and that's in Pisces, and it's at these last degrees, and so it's having a bit of a last hurrah, a last visit with these inner planets. And so this adds a layer of tension in our relationships, in our value systems, and our self-expression. So this aspect highlights the release of unrealistic expectations, patterns of overgiving, fears around emotional or creative inadequacies. And so what no longer serves your growth is being ready to be let go. And if you feel restricted or disappointed, remember that these limits are a part of the alchemy of release. They're guiding you towards a more mature, grounded connection. Now, Mars trying the nodes, it really encourages conscious, aligned action. So this full moon is not about reckless venting. It's about releasing in ways that support you and your evolutionary path. Jupiter sextile Venus and trine Saturn offers the possibility of integrating abundance and love, discipline. You can combine the expansive energy with grounded awareness, letting go of what blocks growth while embracing what serves your higher path. So this Aries full moon is really an invitation to starve the Archons, to release the obsessive loops, and to let go of emotional and relational patterns that no longer serve you. And combine energies in alignment with your truth. So it's all about, moving intentionally and staying present this 2-week period, honoring the intensity of the moment. The cosmos are offering a powerful clearing, and the choice to step into clarity is your own. In Gnostic thought, starving the Archons is not just about thinking positive or ignoring your fears. It's about withdrawing the subtle energy of attention that feeds them. Ancient texts, they spoke of practices like silence and inner stillness as like a shield, where the seeker, you, turns their senses inward instead of outward, refusing to get caught in the endless theater of distractions. They advise fasting not only from food, but from gossip, from conflict and sensory overload, choosing simplicity and restraint so that the Archons have nothing to grip. Prayer and invocation of the higher self or the divine spark within were also seen as weapons, reminding the seeker of their true origin beyond the material world. Even simple acts of radical self-awareness, things like breathing before reacting or questioning every intrusive thought, choosing compassion over anger, curiosity over anger, things like that. These are all forms of starving them. Every time you stop feeding fear or obsession or drama, you take away the nourishment that keeps these forces strong, and your own light becomes harder to obscure. So, under this Aries full moon, these practices become intensely potent. The moon in Aries urges direct action and confrontation so that you can literally see where your attention is being stolen by these obsessive thoughts or relational dramas. Choose to withdraw from it, guys. Because with the sun in Libra opposite, there's this tension between desire and harmony and the pull of reactive patterns. So it's a perfect exercise, a perfect time to practice restraint, pausing before responding, refusing to feed the conflict. Mercury square to Pluto illuminates exactly where the mind is looping, giving you the chance to name the intrusive thoughts and to breathe through them without adding energy to them. Venus opposite Saturn retrograde asks for clarity in relationships and self-worth, encouraging you to starve the Archons by letting go of controlling expectations or fears from inadequacy. So there's a lot of room here to really grow over this 2-week period, to be intentional, to be still, to be aware, to take intentional action. So, a key word this week could be integration. But let's talk about how this will be affecting you through the astrological signs, starting with the rising sign of Aries. So, the advice during this 2-week period for my Aries rising friends is about balance and awareness. Aries rising teaches courage and independence, authenticity, but it can also act recklessly, or reactively, I should say, impulsively. So the guidance is to lead with awareness during this 2-week period, rather than just instinct, to pause before reacting and to channel your bold energy into purposeful action instead of conflict or self-sabotage. In essence, it's about combining your natural assertiveness with a touch of this Libra-like strategy or mindfulness, learning to initiate without scattering your energy. For Aries rising, this full moon can feel like there's something that's been building inside of you and that is finally reaching a peak. There's a sense of culmination, of inner pressure asking you to release something, whether it's old fears or obsessive thoughts or patterns that no longer serve your growth. The moon in your sign, it really illuminates your impulses and your instincts, showing you where you've been reactive or feeding the Archons without realizing it. At the same time, the sun in Libra opposite, it asks you to really balance this release with awareness, how your actions affect others and how you move through relationships. The tension, it really invites you to let go consciously, to starve the compulsions and to integrate the lessons of past cycles so that what emerges is not just impulsive energy, but clarity, intentionality, and freedom. For Aries rising under this full moon, the movie scene that comes to mind is from The Matrix, specifically the moment where Neo chooses to unplug, letting go of the world that he thought that he knew. He's confronting everything that's been controlling him. Fear, illusion, external authority, and taking a leap into clarity and freedom. So the lesson for Aries rising is really similar. This full moon illuminates what has been building inside, what patterns or compulsions have been feeding the Archons of your mind, and it asks you to release them. Like Neo, you're being called to stop feeding the forces that limit you, to act decisively but with awareness. It's not about charging forward. It's about seeing clearly what is real and what serves your growth, and choosing freedom over reaction. The energy is cinematic and it's dramatic, but it's really a call to integrate courage and clarity, conscious action rather than simply impulsive release. Now for Taurus rising with the moon in the 12th house under this full moon, the energy is very different. It's more inward, more subtle, more emotionally intense. The moon in the 12th illuminates the hidden or subconscious realms, old patterns, fears, unprocessed emotions that are coming to the surface for release. You may feel a sense of culmination internally rather than externally. A quiet pressure to let go of what has been stored underneath the surface. This is a fertile ground, let's say, for clearing the Archons in the Gnostic sense. Those mental loops, compulsions, or fears that feed on attention and energy. The things living in your subconscious and affecting your mental health. The lesson here is to allow yourself privacy and reflection. Rather than acting impulsively, your approach should be to move gently with patience and grounding. So things like breath work, meditation, or even creative expression can really help you release what no longer serves you. What rituals are supportive of your mental health right now and serve to ground you? It's about integrating your insight right now with calm action, rather than forcing resolution externally at this time. So stability, patience, and embodiment are your allies. The scene that I keep thinking about for Taurus rising is from The Lord of the Rings, The Return of the King. Specifically when Frodo reaches Mount Doom. He's carrying the weight of the ring, the accumulated fears, the burdens, the unseen pressures of his journey, and the moment that he calls for surrender rather than force. The lesson is that some things cannot be fought with strength or control. They must be released with awareness and trust. So this full moon is really asking you to confront what's been hidden in the subconscious. Those old compulsions that quietly shape your life. Like Frodo, you might feel the heaviness, but the path forward is through conscious surrender, grounding, letting go. The work is internal. Ritual, meditation, journaling, and other reflective practices that allow you to starve the Archons, release what no longer serves you, and to integrate these lessons with patience and embodied awareness. Now for Gemini rising with the moon in the 11th house under this full moon, the focus shifts to friendships, social networks, and your sense of belonging in groups or communities. The moon in the 11th, it really illuminates what has been stored emotionally in your social life. Unspoken tensions, disappointments, or old patterns in how you connect with your peers. This is a culmination moment. It's asking you to release what no longer serves your growth within your community. This might be a good time for an internet detox and deleting social media. Do you know how much we tend to ruminate when we're online? How much we compare ourselves to others, contrast what we don't have, and feel terrible? So the lesson for Gemini rising is to practice conscious discernment, especially around relationships and social engagement. Notice which interactions, energize you versus which ones drain you, and starve the Archons that thrive on gossip, comparison, and social anxiety. Reflection, journaling, or intentional conversation can help you clear mental clutter and emotional residue while still remaining your curious self. It's about releasing attachments to approval or control in groups and creating space for authentic connection. Your cinematic metaphor, guys? Imagine the scene in The Breakfast Club where the characters, they sit together in silence at the end, each having confronted their own social masks and their peer pressures. Gemini rising in the 11th house is being asked to release the invisible weight of group expectations and social anxieties, finding freedom in everyone's authenticity rather than just performance. It's about getting together to work together, seeing what we have in common rather than what sets us apart, and being in alignment with that, and taking calculated actions towards that. Now for Cancer rising with the moon in the 10th house under this full moon, the energy is deeply focused on career, public image, and your long-term ambitions. The moon, it illuminates what has been building in the external, the worldly sphere. Achievements, responsibilities, and all the ways that you've been carrying yourself in your public life. There's a sense of culmination, a project, a reputation, or goal may reach a turning point, asking you to release what no longer serves you and your professional or social identity. The lesson for Cancer rising is to integrate emotional awareness with ambition. So this full moon, it invites you to see where fear over responsibility or attachment to outcomes has been feeding the Archons, keeping you anxious or reactive in your public role. So practices like journaling or reflective planning or ritualized release of outdated goals can help you clear the mental loops. Pausing before decisions, speaking your truth with clarity, and letting go of attachment to others' opinions really supports you in aligning your career and your public life with your authentic self. For a cinematic metaphor for you guys, I'm thinking about The Devil Wears Prada, especially when Andy confronts Miranda at the top of her power, realizing what parts of the world she has been sacrificing herself to. Cancer rising in the 10th is about being asked to release attachment to external validation and professional fear, stepping into authority with emotional clarity rather than with compulsion. What needs to be released in terms of your overall goals, and where can you take action on a new goal that builds your reputation in a brand new way? Now for Leo rising with the moon in the 9th house under this full moon, the energy really centers on beliefs, higher learning, travel, and personal philosophy. The moon illuminates areas where your worldview or your sense of purpose has been crystallizing, bringing a sense of culmination. So you may feel tension between long-held beliefs and the urge to expand beyond them, or between freedom of thought and responsibilities in your life. The lesson for Leo rising is to release rigid attachment to ideas, philosophies, or plans that no longer serve your growth. This is a time to starve the Archons feeding on doubt, fear, or the need for external validation in your intellectual or spiritual life. Practices like reflective journaling or study, meditation, or even exploring new perspectives can help you clear mental clutter and integrate insights. The goal is to really emerge with a more authentic, expansive sense of purpose. For a cinematic metaphor, think of Eat, Pray, Love when Elizabeth Gilbert sits quietly in contemplation in the ashram in India. She's letting go of her expectations and her old patterns, attachments, opening herself up to a deeper understanding. Leo rising in the 9th is about being called to release internal rigidity, trusting in the journey, and stepping into freedom of thought and authentic expansion. Mercury square to Pluto highlights any obsessive mental loops or compulsive thinking about the future, your purpose, or how others perceive your ideas. Rather than resisting or arguing with these thoughts, observe them and name them. Release energy away from them. Venus opposite Saturn retrograde asks you to question where your attachments to certain beliefs or external validation may be limiting you actually. While, Mars trine the nodes, that's supporting conscious action through alignment with your higher path. Practical methods for Leo rising in the 9th to clear the Archons can be journaling about old assumptions or fears around success or knowledge, reading or exploring new perspectives to consciously shift mental patterns, and breath work to release mental tension. Rituals that symbolize release, such as writing down limiting beliefs or burning or discarding them, are also really powerful right now. If you're looking to expand in some way, taking a trip could be very rewarding during this time. So open yourself up to new experiences and new perspectives. Okay, so for Virgo rising, this full moon falls in your 8th house, the place of surrender and intimacy, endings and rebirth. So something hidden within you or tied to another person is culminating now. An emotional contract, an entanglement, or a psychic burden that you've been carrying. This lunation asks you to face the shadow honestly, to see where fear or control has masqueraded as love or safety. For you, the Archons often creep in through obsession or shame, or the invisible contracts that you've carried from your family or from partners. They feed when you keep yourself small, when you stay loyal to pain, and when you convince yourself that suffering is proof of love. The transits push into some level of sharp relief. Mercury squaring Pluto really highlights obsessive thoughts about trust or betrayal or power, and where control has eaten at intimacy. Venus opposing Saturn retrograde, that pulls attention to the tension of self-worth and the restrictions that others place on you. Mars trine the nodes empowers you to cut cords with patterns of giving away your power or binding yourself to karmic contracts. Jupiter sextile Venus and trine Saturn, it provides the discipline and the wisdom to integrate the lessons that you've been learning. Lessons in terms of love and value, transformation, and strength. To starve the Archons here, your release ritual might look like refusing to replay stories of betrayal or resentment. It might mean, speaking a boundary out loud, or even if your voice shakes, writing down the debts, the obligations, and the lingering resentments that you still feel tied to. and maybe burning them just to mark their end. Plus, it just feels good to burn shit, doesn't it? It could be as simple as naming your shame and then refusing to feed it any further attention. This full moon is about cleansing the emotional poisons of old contracts and remembering that rebirth is only possible when you let the dead stay buried. Cinematically, this is Black Swan, the descent into obsession and perfection, and the loss of self that is revealed to be unsustainable. And the only way forward is through the death of the old self, right? That is the power of the 8th house, right? So for Virgo rising, the lesson is that control is not the path to safety. It's just not. Release is the path. Transformation cannot be neat, but it will be liberating. So for Libra rising, the Aries full moon lights up your 7th house of relationships and projection, as well as partnership. Something is culminating in the way that you give yourself to others and in how you hold the mirror of another's gaze. This is a moment where hidden truths about relationships may surface, patterns of compromise, avoidance, or resentment that have reached their limit. For you, the Archons slip in through over-identification with others, through the hunger to be loved at any cost, or through the fear of disappointing those around you. They feed on your tendency to merge so deeply that you forget yourself. The transits sharpen this lesson. With Venus, your ruler, in Virgo, opposing Saturn retrograde in Pisces, there is a test around boundaries, service, and sacrifice. Are you over-functioning, giving more than you receive, or confusing duty with love? Mercury squaring Pluto highlights the mental obsessions, the overthinking what others mean, or spiraling into paranoia about betrayal. Jupiter sextile to Venus and trine to Saturn remind you that true love is structured and sustainable. It doesn't corrode your health or demand your silence. Mars trine the nodes gives you the courage to choose partners, friends, and collaborators who meet you in your growth, not in your stagnation. So, to starve the Archons here, you release the compulsion to explain yourself to those who do not see you, or to contort yourself into a role that keeps the peace. Instead, you might practice silence where you once over-explained, or let discomfort breathe without trying to rush to fix it. You might write down what you believe love is meant to feel like, and you may notice where your reality contradicts it. The clearing comes when you allow partnerships to be a reflection of your wholeness, not as a negotiation for scraps. No more licking crumbs off of the bread knife, right? Cinematically, this is Blue Valentine. This is the rawness of seeing a relationship for what it truly is. The beauty, the intimacy, the loss. And for Libra rising, the lesson of this full moon is that love is not sustained by illusion. To release the Archons is to choose clarity over fantasy, truth over harmony, and to really step back, to mirror your own before you step into another's mirror. Right? That is how we learn equity, after all. That's how we learn harmony, after all. The things of Libra. Okay, and so now we are at our good friends who are Scorpio rising. So for Scorpio rising, the Aries full moon falls into your 6th house of health, work, service, and daily rhythm. This lunation illuminates the patterns of sacrifice, labor, and survival that you've carried for far too long, and patterns that have quietly shaped your body and mind. Something is culminating here. A job that no longer sustains you, a habit that drains you, or a cycle of overwork that keeps you bound. The Archons, they feed on exhaustion, on the belief that you must earn your right to exist through relentless effort, and on the guilt that keeps you chained to systems that consume you. The transits highlight the weight of this moment. Venus in Virgo opposing Saturn retrograde in Pisces shows us where service, creativity, or love has become restricted by duty or perfectionism. Mercury squaring Pluto intensifies mental loops around failure or productivity, urging you to see where obsession has taken over your clarity. Jupiter's supportive sextile to Venus and trine to Saturn offers an opening. Wisdom comes from building structures that nourish you rather than deplete you. Mars trine the nodes, that reminds you that the path forward requires courage to act differently, even if that means disappointing others. To starve the Archons here, you must resist the compulsion to define your worth in life by your output, guys. This is so hard. You starve them by resting unapologetically and by treating your body as a sanctuary rather than as a freaking machine. By refusing to internalize the endless demands of capitalism as your personal burden. A ritual for you might be able to be something really small, like creating a tiny act of rebellion in your daily rhythm. A pause where you used to push, a prayer where you used to criticize yourself or doubt yourself. A blip in the matrix. A refusal where you used to say yes. So cinematically, this is Office Space. This is the absurdity of devoting your life energy to a system that gives you nothing back, and the liberating chaos that follows when you stop playing the rules. For Scorpio rising, the lesson of this full moon is that work, service, and health should serve your vitality, not drain it. To release here is to reclaim your body, to reclaim your rhythm, and your right to live outside of the Archon's clock. Now, for Sagittarius rising, the full moon lights up your 5th house of creativity, pleasure, romance, children, and self-expression. Venus in Virgo, opposite Saturn retrograde in Pisces, is drawing a line between duty and joy, asking where work has crushed your play. Mercury square to Pluto pulls your mind into the depths of comparison, jealousy, or rumination about whether your art or your love is quote-unquote enough. Yet Jupiter, your ruling planet, sextile Venus and trine to Saturn, gives you grounding, reminding you that real pleasure is sustainable when it's chosen with discernment. Mars trine the nodes infuses this level of courage to step into authentic expression, even if it means leaving behind those who cannot meet your fire. To starve the Archons here, you must give yourself permission to play without productivity, to create without reason, and to revel in love and art without apology. You might light candles and dance for no one but yourself, paint without an audience, or write words that no one will ever read but that liberate your soul. You clear the grip by remembering that joy is not frivolous, it's actually resistance. Each act of uncensored creation is a refusal to let shame keep you silent. For those of you who are parents, the Archons could be coming in through our relationship, either with co-parents or with other people within your child's life. You could be teaching these lessons to your children. For example, don't feed the Archons. This could come in the form of bullies or, nosy neighbors or simply self-criticism. There's a lot to be said here from stepping into your own power and teaching others to do the same by truly living life and finding joy in the everyday and lighting up your inner child. Cinematically for you, this is Dead Poet Society. The invitation to rip out the old pages, to seize the day, to reclaim your right to beauty and wild expression, even when authority disapproves. For Sagittarius rising, the lesson of this full moon is that joy is sacred and art is survival. And desire is the gateway to freedom, guys. Now, for Capricorn rising, the Aries full moon falls in your 4th house of home, family, roots, and inner life. This lunation brings a culmination around belonging, how you've been shaped by your lineage, how the soil of your upbringing has both nourished and wounded you, and what kind of foundation that you need now to feel safe. The Archons, they often sneak in here through inherited fear, ancestral silence, or the compulsive belief that loyalty to family pain is the same as love. They feed on you when you replay old roles in the family drama, when you deny your needs for the sake of tradition, or when you keep a locked room inside of yourself where grief is never allowed to breathe. The transits, they magnify this inner reckoning. Venus in Virgo, opposite Saturn, retrograde. This draws a sharp contrast between the expansive possibility and the heavy limits of familial duty or expectation. Mercury square Pluto can churn up obsessive rumination about the past, family betrayals, or the feeling of being trapped by roots that you did not choose. Yet, Jupiter's sextile to Venus and trine to Saturn really gives a pathway forward. The chance to build belonging on your own terms, rooted in wisdom rather than obligation. Mars trine the nodes lends courage to cut karmic ties and to define family as those who truly nourish your spirit. To starve the Archons here, you release the illusion that you owe your soul to bloodlines. You cleanse their hold by grieving openly, by naming the truths that your ancestors could not, and by creating rituals that honor them without inheriting their wounds. A clearing practice might be to write a letter to the family patterns that you're done carrying, or to bury it in the earth, honoring your Capricorn rising. Plant something new in its place. Every act of claiming your inner sanctuary, that carves a new path for you. It starves the forces that thrive on silence and inherited pain, and it creates something new at the roots. Cinematically, this is the Godfather Part 2 for you guys. The pull of family loyalty, the weight of tradition, and the devastating realization that survival sometimes demands breaking away. For Capricorn rising, the lesson of this full moon is that home is not where you are bound, but it is actually where you are free. For Aquarius rising, the Aries full moon falls in your 3rd house of communication, immediate environment, siblings, and daily exchanges. This is a culmination point around the ways in which you process and share information, and how you navigate your local world and relationships with peers or siblings. The Archons, they often feed here through gossip or mental overload, obsessive overthinking, and the compulsive need to have the right answer or to control the narrative. They thrive on distraction, fragmented attention, and the fear that speaking your truth will provoke conflict. The transits make this particularly potent for mental and communicative release. Mercury square to Pluto brings deep, intense thoughts to the surface, obsessive loops, paranoia, or the lure of overanalyzing every word or interaction. Venus opposite Saturn retrograde asks you to examine where boundaries in communication or information intake may have been too rigid or too lax. Jupiter sextile to Venus and trine to Saturn offers perspective and clarity. Disciplined reflection can expand and dissolve old mental blocks. Mars trine the nodes gives courage to speak truth in alignment with your higher path, rather than from fear or compulsion. To starve the Archons, Aquarius rising can practice conscious attention. Notice where your mind spirals, pause before responding, and refuse to feed the loops. Every time you observe without reacting or choose silence over unnecessary debate, you remove nourishment from the forces that thrive on mental chaos. Cinematically, this is arrival. The challenge of translating complex, overwhelming information into clarity. The struggle to communicate without getting lost in fear or obsession, and the ultimate liberation that comes when you finally begin to understand the most important thing. The most important thing is that ultimate liberation comes when understanding flows freely. Not from control, but from freedom. For Aquarius rising, the lesson of this full moon is that clarity and freedom come from conscious communication, not from compulsive mental engagement. For Pisces rising, the Aries full moon falls in your second house of values, self-worth, and material resources. This is a culmination point around what you truly value and how you assign worth to yourself and to the world around you. The Archons often sneak in here through the attachment to external validation, fear of scarcity, or obsessive concern over possessions, money, or perceived stability. They feed on self-doubt and the illusion that your value is contingent on what you have or what others give you. This transit really highlights a reckoning. Venus in Virgo opposite Saturn retrograde in Pisces brings attention between self-worth and perceived limitations, asking you to release outdated beliefs around scarcity, responsibility, or deservingness. Mercury square to Pluto stirs the obsessive thoughts about security, money, personal value, urging you to see where mental loops have been feeding this anxiety. Venus sextile to Jupiter and trine Saturn offers the opportunity to integrate discipline, generosity, and clarity in your approach to resources and self-esteem. Mars trine the nodes encourages bold, conscious action to claim what you need without fear or guilt. To starve the Archons, Pisces rising can focus on releasing attachments to external makers of worth. So practices like journaling about your intrinsic value, creating gratitude rituals, or examining where fear has dictated financial or material choice help redirect the energy from scarcity to abundance. Meditation, breathwork, or gentle embodiment exercises can ground you in truth that your worth is not inherent, but actually contingent. Each conscious choice to calm yourself down, to center yourself, and to claim your value without feeding it fear weakens the Archons and strengthens your autonomy. Cinematically, this is the pursuit of happiness, the struggle to define your worth, the temptation to feed external pressures, and the ultimate liberation when intrinsic value and effort align. For Pisces rising, the lesson of this full moon is that freedom, abundance, and self-respect come from releasing dependence on external validation and claiming the richness of your own inner resources. The cultivation of the human spirit, that's true inner richness. And with that, I leave you this week with one of my favorite songs. I feel like this is a perfect anthem for the energy of the next 2 weeks. Yoko Ono's Yes, I'm a Witch. Each time we don't say what we want to say, we're dying. Each time we say what we really mean, we're living.